Section 7.1, Voting Methods. In Chapter 7, we are, for all intents and purposes, moving completely away from statistics, probability, linear, exponential, finance, all that stuff that we've covered before in class. We're moving away from it. And as I said in the very beginning of this class, there's kind of a smorgasbord approach where we look at a bunch of different things and, not always interconnected. So even though you could have all those things woven into elections and voting, I'm sure we're focusing more on the entry level, the nuts and bolts of voting. So voting itself, very relevant to the society we live in. There's city level, county level, state level, federal level. And all those levels have elections for different things, for candidates, for different propositions, all kinds of stuff gets voted on in this country. And depending on where you're at, there's different ways of selecting a winner, different ways to do the tiebreaker if there happens to be a tie, or maybe it's too close to call. And all these different methods, it has to be agreed upon by people. And sometimes that gets very contentious because, as we're going to see here, there are different ways to determine the winner of an election. And maybe in one county, they want to do it one way, and then in the county next door, they want to do it another way. And you would never get those two counties to agree on a common way. So, it's just an interesting thing that even though you might think it's cut and dry, like, oh, the person with most votes wins, well, there's really other ways to look at it. And people will argue considerably to get a certain way of selecting a winner put in place for their particular area that they live in. So in this section, we're going to see 4 different methods of selecting a winner. And it's going to be the plurality method, the board account method, plurality with elimination method, and then the pairwise comparisons method. So those 4 ways we'll look at. And that's really going to be the focus of 7.1. And then we'll look at this thing called fairness criterion. And there's 4 criterion. Basically, there's a characteristic that determines each. You'll be given some word problems. You will read through the word problems and then determine which fairness criterion was violated. We'll see some examples of that in either part 1 or part 2 of this video. So for winning elections, if the election just has 2 candidates, the candidate with the majority of the votes wins. That should make sense. If there's 2 people or 2 choices, whoever gets the most votes wins. What is the majority? Well, it just means that receiving more than 50% of the vote. If you get more than 50%, you're the winner. You cut things in half, you get 50%. Anything more than that is the winner. Even if it's just fractionally more, that's the majority for a majority rule. Okay, so 2 candidates cut and dry, but when there are more than 2 candidates, things can get more complicated. And there's a variety of methods that can be used, and we're just going to look at 4 of them, as I said up above. But before we see them, we need to know how to organize the results. And the first step is knowing how the voting is done, because this may be different than what you're used to. We're going to use preference ballots, and these are ballots in which voters choose not only their favorite candidate, but they actually order all of the candidates from their most favorite down to their least favorite. So you'd have favorite, second favorite, third favorite, all the way down to least favorite. From there, you then organize the information using a preference table or preference schedule. And it's just a table used to organize the results of all the preference ballots in an election. So let's take a look at an example of this. A group needs to decide where the next conference will be held. The choices are Kansas City, Lafayette, and Minneapolis. The individual ballots are shown below. So all these different 3-letter combinations here are the individual ballots. Not a whole lot of people in the group voting, but that'll make things a little nicer for us. We're going to create a preference schedule summarizing these results. Basically, it's going to be a little table. So I'm going to put 4 rows here, including that top line there. And then I'll put, see this, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 over here. Okay. And then we're going to have the first choice here, second choice here, third choice here. And basically all we're going to do is go through this list. I'm going to start out KLM. So K is the first choice, Kansas City, then Lafayette, then Minneapolis. And I want to look at how many more KLMs there are. So there's another KLM there, and that's it. So there's 2 KLMs. So we need to cross those out. It's kind of like when we were back in statistics and doing the graphical displays, you wanted to cross things out to make sure you didn't miss anything. And even numerical displays is the same way. So similar to there. And then we'll move to the next one here, LMK. So I'm looking for other LMKs. There's another one there, there's another one there, and that's it. So there are 3 LMKs. Cross those out completely now. And then we'll move to MLK. And there's 1 MLK here. That's an MKL, 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 MLK, MLK. So there's 3 MLKs. And then we'll move to MKL. Just moving down the list here. And there's 1 MKL, there's another MKL, and another MKL. So there's 3 of those. And then last but not least, there's 1 KML. And then if you need to be complete here, the last possible choice would be an L with a K, then an M. And there were none of those. You don't necessarily need to put that last column, but if you want to have all the possible orderings represented, you would do that. And that's basically your preference schedule. Across the top, you've got the number of voters for each ordering. And if you totaled all those up, you could see how many people voted. And then you have the preference based on place. Now, I will say in the online homework, they write it a little differently where the number of voters is in a column, and then you have first column, second column, third column. So it's just kind of rotating the table, so to speak. But it's a similar concept, basically the same idea. So once you've organized the data, you can then use one of the following voting methods to decide the winner. Plurality method. The candidate with the most first place votes wins. So you don't even look at second, third, fourth, fifth. If there's more places, you don't look at that. You only count up first place votes, and that's the determining factor for the winner. The board account method, a point system. So each place on a preference ballot is assigned points. Last place receives 1 point, next to last receives 2 points, and so on. So if there's n candidates, the first place receives n points. And then you multiply the point value for each place by the number of voters at the top of the column to find the points each candidate wins in a column. So this is if the preference table is set up like we did on that last slide. If it's going down a column, then you'll be just multiplying it by the numbers in each row. So just keep that in mind. And then you just total up all the points for each candidate, and the candidate with the most points wins. If anyone in here is a sports fan that follows college football at all, they do the board account method for like the AP poll. When they're trying to determine who's the best team in the country, they will send out ballots to all kinds of different sports writers. The sports writers will put in order who they think is the top 25, and then the first place vote gets 25 points, and then they'll take all of the writers' ballots, and every time a team gets a first place vote, they get 25 points. Every time a team gets second place, 24 points, etc. And they'll add up all the points, and then the team with the most points after the end of that tally is ranked as the number 1 team in the nation. So, that's one place in real life where you would see that. And if you don't follow sports, then, you don't worry about it too much. But basically, the rankings determine a point value. And the more times that you see a certain candidate get that ranking, the more points they get. Next one, plurality with elimination or sequential runoffs. And with this one, you're kind of just, eliminating people from the race because they didn't have enough first place votes. And the idea is that you eliminate the candidate with the least amount of first place votes and then redistribute their votes amongst the other candidates. So if you have 4 people in the race, you look at which of the 4 has the least first place votes. Then you kick that person out. You take all their votes and give them to the others. You redistribute them. And the way you do that, in the preference ballot, basically everyone that's below them moves up, so to speak. So once you kick them out, everyone moves up and gets more votes. And it's just the first place votes that you're worrying about. And then you just repeat that process till you find a winner. And if at any time a candidate has a majority of first place votes, then that candidate is the winner. So let's say you got 5 candidates. You kick out the first one because they had the least amount of first place votes. You redistribute their, the eliminated candidate's votes, and another candidate ends up with a majority after that redistribution. That candidate's going to be the winner. Even if you got more people left, you don't keep eliminating because you only need a majority to win. And we'll see that in an example. We'll see all these in an example, actually. So then the method of pairwise comparisons. So for this one, you're going to compare each candidate to the other candidates in one-on-one matchups. So you pair them off one-on-one. It's like, if you got like 5 people out on a basketball court, you only got one person playing against one, and then whoever, wins that one gets a point. And then you pair up the other, 2 more people, and whoever wins that one gets a point. And you pair up 2 more people, whoever wins that one gets a point. And you do this until all the possible one-on-one matchups have been played. So it's kind of like if it was 5 people, it'd be like a 5 choose 2 using that combination stuff that we saw. And that would tell you how many pairings you actually have to make. We won't see that many in this class. Typically, it's going to be like 3 or 4, I think, at the most. But basically, you pair everybody up in one-on-one matchups. Whoever is preferred more gets a point. And then at the end, you see how many points each candidate has. And the one with the most points wins. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this video here. And then in part 2, we'll see an example.